Okay, so we just finished our playthrough of Silent Hill. As always, whenever we finish a playthrough, we like to talk about it from a mechanical standpoint, from a story standpoint, and of course, from a overall standpoint. And this is where I'll talk about whether I recommend it or not recommend it. First of all, mechanics. This is probably the most different mechanics from any other Silent Hill game. There's a couple major things that play into that. One, there is no combat. The combat is essentially just running. You have to run through areas. There is a map that tells you where you need to go, but you just run through, and you try to get to the next location. Usually it's some sort of puzzle or something, and then you keep continuing on. So you can't fight back from the creatures other than like knocking them off of you. The game also has checkpoints. We did play specifically the PS2 version, which is what I will be talking about, not the Wii version. And that mechanic is huge. Like every Silent Hill up to Shattered Memories had combat, and I think basically most of the ones after that did as well. Which there's not that many after it, obviously. But so having a game that doesn't have combat and is focused on running is a big departure. Also, this is a game that is a reimagining of the first game. So that plays into some mechanical stuff of, we have a phone in this one, and that is, the phone and puzzles are basically our two main interaction with the game, right? We can take pictures of these like shadow people, and they give us a little bit of like, they send us messages and voicemails, and that allows us to learn a bit about the lore, about the world, about like what's kind of going on here. And we're playing Harry Mason from the first game, so our protagonist returns from Silent Hill 1. He is a lot more, I guess, fit in this one because he's able to jump over fences. He's able to crawl under stuff, all part of the running thing. He can also hide in stuff. He can knock stuff over. But there is no actual combat. There is not a lot of enemy variety. Basically, all the enemies are the same with the exception of the shape of their head. That's basically it from a design standpoint of those guys. And the puzzles, I would say overall, are pretty simplistic. Now, do remember that some of the puzzles are based on motion-based controls, because this was originally a Wii game that got ported to the PS2. So a lot of stuff is meant for you to be like turning and sliding and up and down. Like, they expect you to have a Wii remote and be doing all sorts of Wii remote stuff. None of that happens in the PS2 version, obviously. You just use the right stick, essentially, to do those same motions of around, slide, up, down, stuff like that. For some people, that might be easier to do. The reason why we did that is because I just don't have my Wii anymore, so this is my only way of playing Shattered Memories currently. But yeah, so that's basically the mechanics. And a lot of the puzzles they're basically like, listen to an audio and do what it says, essentially. There's not a lot of depth to the puzzles. There is no difficulty for the not combat and the puzzles, so all of this stays static. However, I will say one thing that's important is this game has a lot of things. They have a lot of interactions in the game that skew you towards different endings. And that, to me, is the main mechanical component of this game. It's not necessarily just solving the puzzles or just finding out lore. It's that depending on how you interact with the therapy section, which is half of the game, or maybe like a third of the game, you answer questions, there's a coloring thing, there's a things about guilt, things about like sex and stuff like that. So all of this is done from a therapy session, which is done in first person. And that plus the interactions in the world, where if you see a sign that says will protect your family, and you call that number, that's an interaction that moves you towards the family guy, right? So there's different things throughout the world to kind of tempt you in different directions for different endings and stuff, which I think is very, very cool. Also, the world changes depending on what you decide in those therapy sessions. So, like, for example, the more direct example is there's a place where you will color a house to people, like their garage and their car, and when you get to that point, which is the next scene, the things that you color that way will in fact be like, if you gave them a red shirt, they'll have a red shirt. If you painted their car yellow, it'll be yellow. If you paint their mailbox pink, which is like what we did, their mailbox is pink. So you have a direct connection to the world based on the decisions you make in the therapy session. And the world changes models, it changes characters, it changes signs, it changes interactions. Like, there's all sorts of cool stuff. And there's also a lot of areas in the game from an interaction standpoint. Maybe not a lot. There's a few areas in the game where you don't even have to interact with them. But by going in there and interacting with them, you're potentially shifting that gauge of where your ending is going to be. Which, again, is very cool and not really done anywhere else in the series. Most of the series will have, like, a few decisions or a few, like, very static interactions that will lead you in a certain direction. But this one, there's a lot of variance in like what you zoom in on and what you call and what you listen to. And it's very cool. I love the way that this game is so interaction focused versus just being combat, puzzle, move to the next place. And I love the Silent Hill series, but this one is such a big detachment that, like, it's kind of cool to reimagine with the game what the series could look like if they did more stuff like this. Now, would this game be better with combat? Maybe. Could it be worse? Maybe. But we don't have combat, so I think that's most of the mechanical stuff, is just how many different interactions in the world and stuff there are, because you interacting with the world is the gameplay, essentially. So let's move into story. Now, story, I'll try to avoid spoilers here. So if you want to see our playthrough of it, it will be in the videos. There should be a playlist for all of our Silent Hill playthroughs here on YouTube, also on Twitch. But story-wise, without spoiling anything, you are... half of the story is taking place, or a third of the story is taking place in a therapy room where you're asked a bunch of questions, and again, that changes the interaction in your world. The other 2/3 of the game, you play Harry Mason going through Silent Hill, but it's all snowed in, right? Everything is snowed over. There's cars that are buried in snow. There's doors that are buried in snow, stuff like that. So the theme of this one is like cold and freezing and stuff like that, which from a story standpoint kind of makes sense. Again, this game is called Shattered Memories, and it is about memories of Harry, so that it makes sense that it would be cold, because they're meant to be older memories. Again, I'm trying not to spoil anything, because this game does have a twist at the end, which puts everything in perspective, and I think it's a very, very cool twist that I don't want to spoil. I would like for people to engage with it as they see fit, either play the game themselves or watch our playthrough, or anybody else's playthrough, obviously. But the story is also based into those interactions. So again, depending on how you want the story to go, is how you are interacting with the therapy sessions, with the billboards, with the signage, what you're looking at, what you're zooming in on. So those mechanical things feed directly into how the story changes as well. And there is a sequence where Harry will change his clothes, and that sequence, when the clothes get changed, actually tells you which way your ending is kind of skewed towards, which is really, really cool that there's just a logical in-game way to know where you're kind of leaning in terms of an ending. A lot of the characters, in fact, I think most of the characters, if not all the characters from the first game, make a return. You do meet Dahlia, you do meet Kaufman. You do meet Lisa. We also have an extra character in a lady called Michelle. We also meet a guy named John, not for very long, but we do have a character named John. Michelle and John are connected. Their stories are connected, and we explore that through the game as well. They're kind of used as a mirror to relationship stuff. Again, not spoiling too much there, but it's very interesting thing. But overall, the story is this kind of trek through Silent Hill to find Cheryl, who seems to be like moving from place to place. But every time Harry reaches one of those places, he instead meets someone else or has some other interaction thing happen. And then again, sometimes when you hit those story beats, you get taken back to the therapy session to get another test, essentially, that will then again manipulate your world. So it's a very cool connection between the back and forth of the therapy and the gameplay itself. But I think in this, I do believe that the endings are varied enough that it makes sense no matter which ending you get. But there are sub endings. So the way the ending is broken up, and I'm not going to get into any specifics, but you have like an ending, and then you have a sub ending, which can be a few, I think it's 4 different sub endings, and then there's like 3 other main endings, not counting the UFO ending. There is a UFO ending in this game, but it has a lot of endings, and each one of those main endings can have, I believe, one of the other sub endings, which is very cool to see that there's a lot of variance in the ending there. Usually if you go for the good ending like we did, you just get the good and the good. And I say good as in the fashion of it's the best one for the character. It's not necessarily the happiest one. So it's one of those that, like, whenever we say good ending for this series, it's the one that basically is the most positive given the situation. But I love this game. It is definitely still one of my favorite games. We did beat it in one sitting on stream, so it took us about 4.5, 5 hours. So not a very long game, but I don't think it needs to be. I think it comes in, does what it needs to do, and leaves you with what you got. This game came out in 2009, by the way, if you're wondering. But yeah, I like Shadow Memories. I really do. I think I will say the PS2 version, just to note, does have some hitching. It does have lower resolution and stuff like that because it's running on what is an older gen console compared to the Wii. But overall, it didn't really have too many issues with it. But as an overview, like I was saying, I love this game. I really do. I think it has a good place in the series. I think it's worth playing if you've never played it. Just if you want to answer the game's questions with your own personal answers, right? Like, if you want to look at these tests and stuff, like an example is the first questionnaire. The first 3 questions are: I make friends easily, true or false. Having a drink helps me relax, true or false. I always listen to other people's feelings, true or false, right? So that's kind of the thing with that. And you can answer that for your own personal stuff. So like if you're not basing it on trying to get a specific ending like we were, you could be like, okay, I agree with this statement or disagree with the statement, and you can do that with all the tests, and it's a very interesting, maybe introspective way. Now, I would not say this is a good session of therapy. In fact, I complained through the whole game that our therapist is a very bad therapist, so don't take anything the therapist says to heart in the game. But it is interesting to see, like, using your personal choices in these tests to see where it puts you on the spectrum of the game. Again, don't take any of it personally. There's only, there's static endings, so you might be in an area that's like between 2 endings, and you'll get one over the other because of some specific choice kind of thing. I would not use this as a way to gauge your own levels of depression or anxiety or anything like that. But it is very interesting, and I do recommend it. Again, my caveat with this game is, do not, unless you have a lot of money, purchase the PS2 version. This version is $400. It is not worth $400. It is actually cheaper to buy a Wii console and the Wii version pretty much twice over than it is to buy a single copy of the PS2. I don't know what drove the price up. I don't know why the price is so high. If you want to play this version because you don't have the Wii version, I would say emulate it. It should emulate fine, I think. I don't know. I don't use a lot of I don't use any emulation. I do have the Wii version, but I don't have a Wii, so I would have to get that set up. But I think it's worth playing. I think it's worth engaging with. Is it going to be everyone's favorite experience? Not even close. I think this game is probably one of the most polarizing of the series. At least one of the top 2 most polarizing, I would say, on whether people like it or dislike it. I'm in the camp that I love this game. I think it has a really good place in the series, and I like the reimagining, and I like how it engages with stuff, even though it's very obviously not really canon to the rest of the series. So my recommendation is emulate it if you're going to play PS2, or if you have a Wii and you want to get the game is relatively cheap. I think it's like 40-50 bucks for the Wii version. Let's see, Shattered Memories. All right, for the PlayStation 2 version, it's currently $340. Okay, so the price has come down a little bit. But for the Wii version, oh, there's also a PSP version. I don't know anything about that. Yeah, the Wii version, okay, the Wii version has actually gone up in price. It's only, it is 80 bucks, but it is still 4 times cheaper than one copy of the PlayStation 2 version. So I would definitely recommend, if you want to play it on original hardware, that you could probably find it there. And that's for a complete copy. If you're not a big collector of complete stuff, you could usually find the disc for even cheaper. But my recommendation is just emulate it. A lot of these games are very expensive in the Silent Hill series, and the price is going to keep going up as the games get more popular and all of that stuff. So please do emulate it. And if you watched our playthrough, I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't watched our playthrough, should be a playlist of all of our Silent Hill playthroughs. We will be getting to Homecoming and Downpour in November, so look forward to those, and I will see you all in the next review. Thank you. Bye-bye.